I just wanna spread my wings and fly away. Still praying for better days. Take from anything come my way. Fix if anything's out of place. Put a halo top my head. Forgive me, God. Send me an angel.
Step through the high security doors of Nashville's Juvenile Detention Center,
Wanna spread my wings and fly away. Still praying for better days.
and Tennessee's broken juvenile justice system quickly becomes an issue of black and white.
When I think about the makeup of the children in our detention facility, the majority are African American, and we only hold those youth in our detention facility who we at some point think are a risk to the safety of the community prior to their trial date.
Watch out. Oh, no.
Out on the streets, police see a similar pattern. When those kids make the news, people often see a young criminal. What they may fail to see is the child, a girl whose incredible shyness seems completely incompatible with the robbery-turned-murder for which she now faces charges. Another girl, also accused of murder, who eagerly volunteers, "I can make a heart with my hands." A boy accused of shooting a man during an attempted carjacking asked how his life might have been different, responding simply, "Having a father figure who loved me."
And I remember recently going to a Martin Luther King Day presentation back in detention with the youth, where they were giving speeches about civil rights
I have a dream.
and things that they had learned in class about Martin Luther King, and just thinking how ironic it was, looking around and just thinking how far we still have to go.
Now is the time that you're going to see us have to call it out for what it is if we want to see change. This is absolutely a public health crisis.
Ashford Hughes worked as an advisor to former mayors Megan Barry and David Briley. He says Nashville will continue to lose children of color if the community does not take an honest look at the path that leads to juvenile detention.
And you can't just say, this community is bad, they just need to be better parents. This community is bad, they aren't doing enough. We have to move beyond blaming the victim and look at the systems.
To understand Nashville's juvenile crime problem, advocates say you first have to understand the hand that's been dealt in some communities. Generation after generation stuck in incredible poverty. Many of these kids have witnessed more trauma in their young lives than most people could ever comprehend. Juvenile Court Administrator Kathy Sindback.
Living with domestic violence and witnessing family members get hurt and killed and shot, witnessing neighbors and people in their community get shot and killed, witnessing all sorts of gun violence and people that they love who have had their lives altered by guns.
State versus Maisha Brown.
Take, for example, 16-year-old Maisha Brown, the girl accused in the senseless murder of Rusine Wong. Wong's son sees the tragedy.
And for us, we were sad that her life is thrown away in such an early age.
But advocates also see a girl, a voracious reader born into one of Nashville's most violent housing projects. Her dad, a convicted felon, was killed in a car crash when she was just 6. Her 19-year-old brother, who had also had his run-ins with the law, gunned down just last year.
The environment they came from is a rough environment.
Former juvenile prosecutor Jim Todd.
It's not their fault they were born into it. It's not their fault that they didn't have, a father figure or parents or anyone to teach them right from wrong. It's not their fault that they chose the streets early.
So for our most troubled youth, they do not feel like they are going to live beyond 20. They know people who have died at very young ages from violence, from street violence, from all sorts of, drug overdose. They don't see that their future is a given, and they don't see that they have a lot to live for.
So they have no hope.
These children have no hope.
Another factor, social media and the kids' search for identity. This pic posted by a teenager already on probation.
A lot of our kids are bragging about the things that they're doing, or sometimes the things they're not doing, but that they want people to think they're doing that are extremely negative.
And social media gives them a sense of status that they don't otherwise have?
It absolutely does.
And many of the children juvenile officials encounter come into the system with a long history of untreated mental illness.
Some of them have been drug exposed from the earliest age. They've had many diagnoses of ADHD, severe depression, conduct disorder, all sorts of things where they've been diagnosed with various problems over the years.
Last year, 14-year-old Giovanni Hernandez was gunned down in the Nashville Village area. Court records show the shooter, 14-year-old Amarian Johnson, had a history that included ADHD, conduct disorder, major depressive disorder, borderline intellectual functioning, and cannabis use disorder. The court also heard testimony that Amarian had been present in the home when one of his uncles shot another family member. In addition, the judge wrote, Amarian has suffered through other traumatic events, including the disappearance of his mother, the violent deaths of friends and family members, being homeless on the streets of Illinois, and physical abuse and neglect by his father.
We have kids who have witnessed their siblings be killed by a parent, and then that parent go to prison. We have many kids whose parents are incarcerated who have to go and visit their parents behind bars.
They are broken.
These children are absolutely broken. These children are broken and no one is trying to fix them, it seems, sometimes.
A search of juvenile records shows the greatest number of charges last year came from the 37207 zip code just north of downtown. Close behind was 37208, which has the highest incarceration rate of any zip code in the country.
So we know that urban housing policy was based on a lot of redlining policy that actually put poor African-American people in a concentrated area.
Ashford Hughes says an honest conversation about juvenile crime also requires confronting the institutional racism that broke up African-American neighborhoods and forced families into ghettos, that created mass incarceration and decimated black families.
When you talk about the data that we have that show that black male youth are getting expelled as early as kindergarten, if not before, and the access and the direct pipeline to prison, which that leads to, that is public policy, right? That is public policy that is shaping how our youth are involved in this.
I think poor attachment to school systems has a lot to do with it. If a child's not attached to their school, not interested in going to school, then they're out in the streets learning a different type of life.
Many children in those zip codes attend some of the lowest performing schools in the state of Tennessee, schools that are often ill-equipped to deal with the trauma that their kids bring to the classroom.
Sometimes our kids who have the biggest problems, we find out that they're 15 and they're reading at a second grade level. And that's why they're acting up at school sometimes, because they're not following what the teacher's teaching and they're not able to comprehend.
Is it fair to say that there are communities in our city that are in crisis?
I think it is fair to say that there are communities in our city that are in crisis at this time.
And no one in the city is declaring an emergency and saying we've got to fix this problem?
I don't know if there's enough cries.
Everybody's frustrated.
Vice Mayor Jim Schulman recently created a Metro Council committee to focus on the problems of the 37208 zip code, which Judge Calloway says is a good start.
But no one so far has come up with a comprehensive plan.
As far as I know, no one has come up with a comprehensive plan in order to make those neighborhoods not be in crisis anymore.
As a city, for us to firmly address it, it needs to be considered a health crisis. What happens in North Nashville affects what happens in Madison. The problems that affect Madison also affect what happens in the southeast of Davidson County. So this is a crisis of magnitude that represents the entire county.
It's a conversation that we need to have, but we've postponed because of issues of race.
Absolutely. And I believe until we really address the fundamental core root of this situation, this health crisis, I think we're not going to see much change.
The juvenile court judge says police and the courts can only do so much to help these children. If the community wants long-term solutions, it's going to take a long-term commitment. For 2 years, Calloway has been asking the Metro Council for a new $130 million facility to provide interventions that she believes are desperately needed.
What we have to do as a community is, first of all, recognize that we're leaving people behind, and recognize when you leave people behind in such dramatic ways that that trauma causes For some people, bitterness causes anger, causes people to be hurt. And there's a famous saying that hurt people hurt people.
What do you think the consequences are of not doing something?
If we don't do something together as a community, as the entire community, then we're going to start losing people.